Hi guys. So today we're going to talk about what makes a leader. How do people rise into leadership roles? Essentially, how do people gain power, right? So there's a lot of misconceptions on why people get promoted, why someone becomes a CEO, why someone leads over a bunch of other people. And there's all kinds of lingo for this that we use, alphas, etc. And there's actually quite a bit of science around this area, and I wanted to share it with you guys because it's actually really interesting and completely counterintuitive to what we believe in our mass media common culture. So we all think that, the person who's the alpha actually gains all the power. And when we think alpha, it's someone that's, dominant, domineering, in charge, has a really strong personality, etc., right? So let's take a step back and maybe first think about where did this idea even come from? I'm sure most of you have heard about Machiavelli, right? So we know that The Prince is actually the 32nd most influential book in human history. And it actually might be the most influential book on power, how to get power, how to keep power. And so we know that Machiavelli lived in Italy, but he actually lived in a historical time in Italy in which Italy was one of the most violent places on earth, ever. So we have to remember that these rules that he made in The Prince, and I'm sure some of you might have heard of this book, read it even, these rules were made for that environment, an extremely violent, unpredictable, chaotic environment. So some of his rules were things like, conceal intentions, keep others in suspended terror, crush everything totally. So I feel like that there's still people that think that this is the way to get power even in the year 2020. And let me disabuse you of this notion. It is not. If you want to gain power, if you want to become a leader, if you want to move up in your organization, this is not the way to do it. And I can say this with such confidence because there's really good research on this topic, especially from a professor in Berkeley called Dacher Keltner. And he studies power, and he has this amazing book called The Power Paradox. I'll link it below. I encourage you to read it. It's super informative. So what we actually know about power and about gaining power is that the way that people gain power in this year, in this environment, is by advancing the greater good, which means advancing the greater good of others, not themselves. So there's 3 things that people who gain power do, and we know this from tons of studies. I will link some below. So people who gain power, people who rise up, do 3 things. They share resources, they are really good listeners, and people who gain power routinely spread gratitude in their organization. Okay, 3 things. So let's talk a little bit more about this research, right? So how is it that people who are sharing resources, spreading gratitude, and being really good listeners, having high amounts of empathy, how are they the ones gaining power when everything we see in the media and in maybe everyday life, we see people that are not acting like this who have leadership roles? So, I mean, just, turn on any news channel, etc. You see lots of people in leadership roles that are not doing this. And so you're like, well, that sounds very wrong. I don't know what you're talking about here. So actually, this is where the power paradox comes in. So we actually think that being, rude, being egocentric, being Machiavellian is how people gain power. No, that's what happens after somebody has power. And this right here is the power paradox. We got the causality wrong. The relationship, the direction is wrong. We don't gain power by being Machiavellian. Being Machiavellian happens to us after we get the power. So we know that once somebody becomes powerful and they're in a powerful role, they have impulsive behavior. They're more rude. For example, in a study by the same scientist here, Dr. Keltner, he did a study in which he randomly got 3 people to go into an experiment, and they were just assigned to do something super boring. I think it's something related to research writing. And one of the people in the 3-person group was randomly assigned as the leader. Just complete randomness, right? And during their task of boring research writing, they were given a plate of cookies. But there were 3 participants and 4 cookies, right? So then there was like kind of the like awkward scenario there, like who takes the last cookie? And they found in this study is that the leader, the random leader, was way more likely to take the last cookie. And additionally, that leader was also way more likely to eat the cookie in a rude manner. So crumbs going on the shirt, mouth open, things like that. So it seems that once somebody gains power, they just kind of lose the ability to take the perspective of other people. And from the neuroscience angle, this might be because we don't use that part of our brain anymore. So once we kind of stop having to take the perspective of other people, it kind of atrophies a little bit. So we rise to power through our social intelligence, but we lose these capacities when we achieve this rise to power. If you want to be a leader in the long term, it's important to be very wary of these Machiavellian tendencies, these impulse control behaviors that come once you have power. And remember that the true long-term ability to sustain power, according to research, is the ability to take other people's perspectives, to champion others, to have empathy. I hope this video helps. And if you have any questions, please comment below. I'd love to answer them. And please share this video if you have anyone in your network or circle that's trying to rise up in a leadership role or already has.